Okay, so we'll talk about drawing feet, and really I'm just going to kind of cover the basic structure of how I tend to approach drawing feet. So, one of the things that I remember doing as a student, I'd kind of draw the toes, and I end up with this like really weird looking thing, and I just would kind of follow the contours and the edges of the foot, and end up looking something kind of like that. So the biggest thing when you're drawing anything, like hands or feet, and feet I don't think are necessarily quite as complex as drawing hands. But anything you're drawing, especially anything on the figure, like arms, hands, feet, whatever, you got to think of it a little more three-dimensional. And so if you think of the foot a little more like that, you're going to have better success at drawing it. Okay, so I don't know. There's so many different ways to approach this, but I kind of draw it more as like this little wedge. Okay, you think of it kind of like a doorstop, or there's like the wedge of cheese you'd see on the old cartoons. And let me change this here. So, but again, you got to think of it like a three-dimensional geometric shape. Okay, and again, there's so many different ways to approach this. I've seen so many different methods. There's some where they kind of approach it as, almost more like drawing where it looks almost more like a boot. It's got this like heel to it. Okay, so I'll tend to do that, and then I tend to put kind of like a little, or I don't know, even when I'm sketching the feet, I don't tend to go so much, right to basic shapes, but I keep those basic shapes in mind as I'm drawing. Okay, so as you keep getting better at this, you don't necessarily have to always start with like a wedge, and I always call it the hockey puck. It's just a really flat cylinder. So I'll tend to do a wedge, and then sort of this little hockey puck on the bottom, and then another one up here for the foot. The center of the foot. And this is what tends to work for me. Okay, and again, you don't necessarily have to approach it with that same type of shape, but that's what I like approaching it as. Because you're going to find that, say, from the bottom, okay, from the bottom of the foot, where you're going to have the most padding, can be on the heel, and then basically like, a couple of spots here. And then, of course, there's your toes. Your toes will help you keep balance. Okay, and so this is sort of representing this part for me, and then this is representing this part for me, and of course this is the rest of the foot. Okay, and so the reason we have more padding in those certain spots is because we're standing on our feet, we're walking our feet, so it needs the most padding. So, and similar to your hands, where your hands are going to have more tissue here and then more bone, and your foot's the same way. Okay, and the other thing that sort of my method isn't quite as showed as well, but your foot is on this arch. Okay, so it's sort of this form that does curve in space. And then, you tend to have this, like I said, a little hockey puck there underneath, and then, again, you tend to have this other one in the front, which is this part. Okay, so my little method, I kind of get that arch back in as I start drawing. So I'll start curving things out. Okay, but heel, and then call it the ball of the feet, and then of course the upper part of your foot. I'll just kind of sketch that in here, and then your toes. Okay, and so if this is the right foot, then what's going to happen is you're going to have your toes there, so your big toe. Okay, and you're going to notice that your little toes tend to actually, I think it happens more with your little toes. They tend to actually kind of point down. And then your little pinky toe is always way off on the edge there. Okay. And so again, whatever shape you start to approach it with, again, so here I am kind of drawing it a little bit out of proportion. Again, same basic structure. You still end up in the same spot. So whatever works for you is what's going to work for you. Okay, but the reason I kind of like doing that wedge is that, you know, if I've got something that's like way sideways, you know, I'm seeing the foot from the side, which is usually kind of the easiest way to draw it. Again, I can kind of start with that, and then, you know, and then I'll make my little taller little hockey puck here for the front. Like I said, as I go, I kind of end up, you know, changing the shape, and again, I don't know if I really anymore like go this basic when I start getting the form in there. But that's what I'm thinking in my head, is that it is sort of this little geometric shape. Okay, and so again, just the fact that it's more of a simple like boxy shape, I feel like I can turn it in space a lot easier. So even if the foot is, you know, say it's coming right at us, you know, you got that point of view we all hate drawing where it's coming right at you. You know, you can actually kind of, and you can angle this to give it a little more of a one-point perspective. Maybe you can think of it like that, and then, of course, I still have that form that I like drawing right there, and then, again, the toes. We'll just kind of do little shapes for them for now. Okay, and another method that I remember one of my professors showing me is that, you know, if you're dealing with a foot coming right at you, you can sort of scribble it into this little form that it's like a little cylinder kind of going back in space. And the little scribbles, the fact that they follow the contour of how the foot would be, and that tends to help, because then you can kind of picture it more three-dimensionally. And then just start to form it again into what you want it to be for the foot. And I spaced the toes apart a little too far, but it's okay. I'll have to kind of fit the little pinky toe there. And again, depending on how it is, you might have a slight angle. You might see a slight hint of the heel there. Okay, so, you know, sometimes that scribble form I'll tend to use a little more, especially if it's coming out straight at me. I have a little bit harder time visualizing it that way. But again, it's just because I've gotten in the habit of drawing it that way. But again, 3/4 views, side views, I find this to be, you know, sort of that approach to be a little easier. So then when I'm drawing the foot, again, I may not necessarily go right to using those little basic shapes, but I'll tend to, you know, again, just very subtly approach it the same way. Even if I'm trying to go more right into the actual anatomy that I see there. See, I'll kind of sketch it out with these same ideas in mind. Okay, so again, I try to break it up into, like I said, these little hockey pucks, but it, you know, right here at the ball of the feet, I try to use that shape, and then like a little short one for the heel. And again, this little wedge shape that I like using. That I feel works pretty good for me. Okay, but again, there's different ways. Like I said, you can think of it more like a boot where the heel is sort of this little boxy shape. Okay, and then it's got this, curvy form is there, and then you can actually think of this as more boxy. Okay, and so again, that one's a little scribbly, but whatever form works for you, that just helps you accomplish the same idea. That's what you're going to look for. Okay, and you can actually kind of draw the big toe and then put the small toes kind of into a little bunch before you start breaking them up. And you'll find with the toes that, yes, obviously you'll have, they're structured a lot like your fingers, they just don't have the same dexterity. But you think of those as being a bit geometric also. You're going to find that they're actually a bit easier to draw. The same way that I approach drawing fingers is that when I'm drawing fingers, again, I'm thinking of them as being more three-dimensional. And so you can see that's where I try to break it up into these little boxy forms that allow me to make that shape, already three-dimensional from the beginning. So when you're drawing toes, obviously slightly different shape and doesn't quite have the same, you can't quite do the same things with it, bending it and picking things up, but they're really similar. So when you're drawing them, and you can kind of see I did it right here, think of it a little more three-dimensional and boxy, and as you're drawing them, it's going to get easier. So if you're drawing a small foot, you don't have to get quite that detailed, but if you're drawing a much larger foot, something that is maybe more at this size that I'm doing here at the bottom of the page, then you'll have to draw bigger toes, and so that's where that shape will come in handy a lot more for you.